My biggest inspiration really comes from story. And so I love to weave in story, a theme certainly, but also a deeper story into my work. And so I'll kind of set out with this story in mind and then really work to build out a collection that supports that overall story.
Over and over again, I'm reminded by the thriving creatives I meet that there's primarily one thing they all have in common. It is what I call their come from. It is where their art and inspiration is derived. In artists who have established tremendous momentum, I see that they are all creating firstly for themselves, and this leads to their art being highly personal and as a result, known, collected, and celebrated in the culture. My guest today is Bonnie Christine, a highly successful surface designer and artist. She's a perfect example of someone who has, since early on in her development, totally nailed her come from. Her art, life, and business, they're just all elegantly tied together with the most beautiful thread of creativity. I believe this conversation will be helpful for anyone interested in making a more vibrant, creativity-centered life. So join me now as Bonnie shares how she has created hers to be one of abundance, beauty, and grace. Examples of Bonnie's elegant surface patterns, as well as links to her artist mentoring and membership programs, can be found in the show notes of this episode by visiting arttolife.com and clicking on podcast. Join me now as Bonnie and I dive into the world of not just surface design, but life design. Welcome to Art to Life, a podcast for the creatively curious. My name is Nicholas Wilton, and each week I'll help you rediscover not just the art of your life, but the art in your life. Join me as we explore that perfect blue at twilight, the wild frontiers of art making, and the extraordinary joy of finding your way as you go. So Bonnie, thanks so much for joining us today and taking a break from your little family vacation to talk.
Nicholas, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So your whole world of pattern design and just the beauty you create in the world, I mean, in everything you do, because you're involved in teaching and memberships and helping artists, but you just have such a artful way of living, really. And I would love to just go back. I know that your mom was creative, but how did this all start for you?
My mom was creative. I grew up really immersed in creativity. And, every part of my childhood was creative. And so I always knew that I wanted to do something creative. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So when it was time for me to go to college, I went to business school and afterwards moved back to my hometown and I started working for my mom at her fabric store. And my job was to meet with reps and look at upcoming collections and kind of decide what we were going to carry in the store. And this was back in like 2009, 2010. And I will never forget the moment that I was walking down an aisle in the shop with fabric on both sides of me. And it just hit me, oh my goodness, someone is doing this for an entire career. And it just kind of wrapped up everything that I loved in life into one really beautiful career option. Once I realized that, how funny is it that we see this stuff every day and oftentimes we don't really think about the person who's creating it. And so I had this dream really settle into my bones of becoming a fabric designer.
But wasn't it like most of the fabric that, when I walk down the fabric aisle, I don't find it that, I don't like most fabric, but was that because your mom was curating that aisle?
Yeah, definitely. There are so many different types of fabric and genres, and we were more of a modern quilting store. And so we really carried just breathtaking and beautiful fabrics.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and these designers were just queens to me, And the problem, though, was that I had no idea how to get started. I would have said that I was creative. I would not have called myself an artist. I didn't have any kind of regular art practice or sketching practice. I didn't know anybody, and at this time there were also really nobody teaching this type of thing. There were no online classes, and so I considered going back to school. I had also just gotten married, and I started filling out the application for art school. And, that would have uprooted us and we would have had to change towns and all of this. And so I thought, I'm just going to try. I'm just going to try to learn this on my own. And it lit a bit of a fire underneath me. And I just set out to really piecemeal together my entire education. And so over the course of 2 years, I worked really, really hard to learn. I did this thing where I promised myself that I would do one thing every day that would kind of inch me towards this big, huge dream, because to me, it was just the furthest thing away from a possibility. And it felt really overwhelming at the beginning, so overwhelming that I didn't really do anything for many months because I just didn't even know how to get started. And then I thought, what if you just did one thing every day?
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah, well, it worked. For some reason, that really narrowed my focus, and I obsessed over it, meaning I did not skip a day in the course of 2 years. And at the end of that time period, one thing had led to the next, and I attended Quilt Market with my portfolio and had meetings with reps and ended up licensing with my number one pick company, and that was in 2012.
Wow. Well, so you just hit it. I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself okay, I like all these fabrics, but where did you get inspired from? I see a lot of nature influences, but you were saying you'd never really done any art before. How did you come up with something? I mean, just anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I very much from the very beginning wanted to design really what I wanted to see come alive in the world. Meaning, I think a lot of illustrators end up working towards briefs or working towards things that are marketable. And my really onset from the beginning was to just create from from really my heart, and just create what I really wanted to see, and then see if someone was also interested in it. And that has seemed to work. I think it really helps our work resonate more deeply with not only ourselves, but with the people who see it too. And so I set out to really begin an art practice, and I spent about a year. So I spent about a year learning Adobe Illustrator, which is the program that we finish our work in. And then I spent about another year just creating. And so I really did nothing but gather inspiration and sketch and paint. So everything I do starts on paper.
Is that with gouache? Are you using gouache, or what kind of paint?
Yeah, I'm using gouache. I'm also using watercolor, and it's very kind of simplistic at that stage. But it took a long time to discover all of the different ways that you can create artwork. And, I think that this is the stage that so many people really want to rush. They really want to rush and kind of get to that point that they feel refined and that they have a style or a signature style about their work. And to me, there's really no shortcut. It just takes exploring all the different approaches to creating art and all the different ways that you can layer in techniques and things like that. And so over the course of a year, I created just over 100 patterns. And it really wasn't until that point that I could look back and start to see, a consistency, a style in my work. It just took me doing the work to get kind of to the other side. And of course, it's evolved since then. But my biggest inspiration really comes from story. And so I love to weave in story, a theme certainly, but also a deeper story into my work. And so I'll kind of set out with this story in mind and then really work to build out a collection that supports that overall story.
Wow. So what you did amazingly from the beginning, it's something that, I'm teaching now, like people really far along, but this idea, it's almost like you're reverse engineering your art. Like what you said you just did what you thought you loved. You just made what you loved, and then you would find the people. And that's a fine art approach, right? That's very different than someone saying, hey, we need fire trucks on these kids' pajamas. Can you do fabric? I mean, that's,
Right.
that's more like illustration. But so you got you in the game so early. That's just really impressive to me.
Yeah, and that's also what I teach, just because that's what comes natural to me. And I'm always surprised at how surprising that approach seems to be to people. I think some people want more guidelines, well, what do I need to do? And for me, it's not about what you need to do. It's about what you want to do. What do you really want to create? That, builds in a much more personal process. I think when we do that, we also have to start talking about vulnerability and what it feels like to show work that feels so personal to you. But it makes, I think, everything so much more rewarding.
So give me an example. I love your idea. Like, I love story too, but tell me how that goes. Like, what's an example of a story that you then were able to kind of layer into patterns?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about the story that I just recently released a collection called The Wild Forgotten. And this story was inspired by an actual event that happened. There was this popular children's dictionary that was for 7-year-olds, and my son happens to be 7. And so I just learned about this dictionary that, a children's dictionary only can contain a certain amount of words. It's not the full dictionary. And they had to update it to reflect the most common words that children were using today. And so I read about this, and it was wrenching to me. They ended up taking out all of these words that were nature related and had to put in words that our kids use today, like broadband and chat room, Wi-Fi, gigabyte,
Wow.
things like that. So this collection really came to life because there's this entire list of words that they removed, and it was common things like dandelion, doe, blueberry, beaver, fungi, all of these really beautiful nature words. And so to me, this was invigorating, right? Because it's our fault as parents. It's our responsibility to make sure that these words stay alive. And so I took that and I created this whole collection out of it. So a series of 16 prints, and everything that's illustrated is a representation of one of the words that got removed. And then every print and every color and each collection is also named words that were removed. And so, at first glance, that's not apparent, right? You have to kind of look at the collection and then read the story that goes along with it. But it really draws the viewer in and really draws the end user into the story. And, my hope was to really reignite the use of these words in our homes.
And does that story, I mean, I'm picturing like this would be a series of fabrics, right? Or like, is there a place to put that information?
Yeah, so when we release the collection, we release it kind of in a bundle. So it comes with a story, it comes with all of the names attached to it. And so it's possible that the end viewer will, use it and never know the story. But every shop that gets access to the collection and the website, and of course me, are all telling the story that kind of goes with it.
God, that's so great. I love this model of you're just taking control back. It's like Beyonce just making, amazing content with music, with pictures, video. It seems like you're now bringing in words and ideas, and that's really exciting. Wow.
Yeah, I think it makes the design process just come alive. It breathes so much into the process, and it breathes so much into the inspiration collecting process. And I love how it kind of focuses. I don't know about you, Nick, but sometimes I think as creatives, our superpower is having a lot of ideas. And then it's also kind of like our downfall
Yeah.
to have so many different things that pull at us. And so when I can really sink my teeth into a story, it narrows my focus and it really just helps me run with it from start to finish, all the way through the color lines and things like that.
Yeah, and it's really what we share and what we remember. And I mean, I just love that you're tying your art into a bigger context in the world. Now, how much, like, one challenge I had was, was the art director, or, it sounds like you're so fortunate that you work for, it sounds like you work for this one company that just gives you a lot of freedom. But was it always like that? I mean, if you don't they sometimes say, well, these are the colors of the year and you got to do these colors? Or isn't that a problem that exists for its commercial viability and all that?
I think it is a problem that exists. I think it hasn't been for me. You're right. I've been really lucky to work with a company who trusts me and gives me a lot of freedom. And then the way I work is really, I do these collections, and then other industries, will then have a lot to choose from as well. And so, of course, things do get changed along the way. But it's something that I really think we should be attentive to during the, research phase. And as we start working with companies, is how much freedom do we have? How much say do we have in the final, colors, for instance, or tweaks to our design? Do we always get final approval? Do we always get to, check products before they hit the shelves and things like that? And so it's important to know that, especially if it's important to you.
Yeah. And what was the name of the company that you do most of your releases with?
Yeah, I've been licensing with Art Gallery Fabrics since 2012.
And so when you create a pattern, this might end up on duffel bags. It might be on a skateboard, right? You don't know that, where it's going to be.
You don't know. Of course, I know with Art Gallery that it's going to be on fabric. So we do cotton quilt, like quilting weight cotton fabric, knits, and voile and canvas. And so people will use that for clothing, for quilting, curtains and home decor, and reupholstery and things like that. But if I move away from that industry, it ends up on all sorts of fun things like wallpaper and stationery and ribbon and tech cases and things like that too.
And I'm just curious because I don't know this industry. I'm more familiar with, like, you can sell a painting, but I imagine that there's a residual kind of income stream from this. I mean, do you have patterns do they expire, or are they ones that you did 5 years ago you're still getting compensated for?
Yeah, you're tapping into what makes licensing so incredible. When I say back in, when I was first getting started, that this checked all of the boxes, one of the boxes for me was creating income that had no ceiling to it. So my very early years, I had got started with an Etsy shop selling handmade aprons and tea towels before I was an artist. And, I had become fairly successful at it. And one day I sat down and really did the calculation of, if I continue to make as many aprons as I can in a day, 5 days a week, and sell out of, every day, what was my maximum income for the year? And I tell you what, Nicholas, the max income wasn't exciting, and it was also really exhausting. And so really early on, I had this hope of creating residual or reoccurring revenue in my business so that I could have more freedom to move around and, raise a family and that kind of thing. And so licensing is residual income, meaning you do the work once and then you can get paid for it over and over and over again. And so different companies work different ways, but my particular company licenses the design until there is no more demand for it, which means that at this point, I'm about, 10 years in with this company, that I'm still getting royalties from collections that I did years and years ago. And so they kind of compound. Yeah.
How many things will it be on? Well, like, what's the applications? I mean, is it normal for, are there 50 products out there with some of your patterns on them? Or what are the unusual things that it's appeared on? Like, what's the range?
Well, there's a huge range with what people end up doing with the fabric itself, right? And so I love seeing just what people end up creating, because being a fabric designer, I think, is somewhat unique, because you really don't know what what people are going to then take your fabric and turn it into. So it's really fun to see people, design their nursery around a collection, or come out with a clothing line with your collection. I had this company come out with intimates, like underwear, with my collection one time. You just never know where it's going to end up. But I think something that's unique about licensing is that it's typical. Of course, this is all contract, based from contract to contract, but it's typical that you can license one design or a collection in an industry, and then you can license the same design in another industry. So contracts are typically industry specific, meaning I can license the same piece of work across fabric, and then again in wallpaper, and then again in home decor, and then again in rugs. And so one piece of art really takes on a life of its own and can work for you in, across a multitude of industries across the entire globe for years.
Wow. It's like the NFT model a little bit, that, you're an artist, but you have a residual income stream. It's just not something that the rest of us have. I mean, we sell that painting or whatever, and then it's gone. But that is so great. So you're just building your momentum with what you're doing and getting more and more freedom. How long do you spend, in a quarter? Well, how many fabric productions do you create?
Yeah, so I typically do 2 a year. And one collection will be 2 different colorways. So that's typically 10 different prints in 2 different colors. So that's 20 different prints, 10 different designs, if that makes sense. So I do about 2 a year, and each of those will take me about 6 weeks from, really concept to production files.
And are you showing your business partner, what this is what I'm thinking, or do they just trust you and you just make this now?
Well, I used to, and now I get to kind of just present. Though that's not to say that they always get accepted. We have a really great working relationship where we can kind of toss around ideas, or say, I have 2 or 3 different ideas or directions I'm thinking about going in. What do you think would fit this season, or what's coming out in the next lineup, and that kind of thing. And they are amazing at giving feedback on color. It's a very open dialogue, and so much mutual respect, right? Because we have 2 completely different perspectives. I have, the artist perspective, and they, though, have really the consumer perspective. And they're the ones who are in touch every single day with the shops that are carrying the fabric, and they know what's selling and what's sitting on the shelf too. So I think it's really invaluable to have just a really strong relationship and open dialogue with an art director, because their perspective is really, really valuable.
So, when I think of patterns and fabric designs, and, when I think of your work, it's just all beautiful. But, when I make paintings, there's an aspect of it that's beautiful, but sometimes it's too beautiful. And I don't know if you understand or get that, but what are your thoughts around beauty? And again, your things are so cool because they kind of appearing in life and in these really simple ways, like, oh, it's a bedspread, it's a utilitarian napkin, or a tablecloth, and beauty is needed there. But I see how you bring meaning to this. I get it now, like with that story. That's so different. But is beauty enough? Do you sometimes feel if everything's beautiful, like, is it?
You're getting deep on me, Nick. Your work is always beautiful. I think I know what you're saying. And I think it's so interesting, right? Because some people would think my work is beautiful and some people wouldn't. And it's a hard thing to put work into the world and say, do you think this is beautiful? Because obviously everybody won't. And how do you receive that kind of feedback or that kind of criticism? And so I really kind of go into a tunnel. And like I said, I really just try to not create what I think people will like or not create what I think will sell, but really create what I personally want to see in my own life really come alive. And, that has helped me kind of put my blinders on a little bit and focus in on just creating from the heart.
Yeah. I think it's like you can go to like a really amazing taco stand in LA and it's really gritty and there's just something so great about it. And then you can go to like a taco place in a mall that's really cool, that's like really curated. And I don't know, like I think there's a blend of both. And I guess it's just there's such a curation that I just wonder if sometimes you would just want to like be like the opposite of you and just like mess it up or do things that are kind of darker, or I get to have that range, it feels like maybe that's just not something that you feel you need. I mean, that's what I would want. Like I would want to do some darker, like darker fabrics, but I don't think people would want that as a tablecloth. I mean, I guess, does the utilitarian aspect confine you at all? Or are you just like fine in this like really hypnotically beautiful, like it's so peaceful and lovely, but do you miss grit?
You want me to throw a bucket of paint on it, don't you?
Yeah, I want you to, yeah, like, I don't know. I just, like, do you ever lose control, right? In making these, yeah. Or, like what the range is like, how do you fulfill that in you? Like, I've seen you do, well, like, this is a perfect example. Like, I've seen you do that CrossFit stuff. Like you have that animal warrior strength, like the she-wolf thing. So maybe that's the answer. It comes out in other places,
It does. It does come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you've got that. So maybe that's the answer.
I do like to have an element of surprise. And so I think it's interesting that I typically use black in a collection, and you'd have to know my style to kind of be surprised by that, because it's very ethereal. It's very botanical and light and sophisticated. And I will always weave in a black, not a pure black, like a deep dark gray in my work, or a brown. I love using lots of brown. And so I do try to go a little bit moody, or at least have some element of like, evolution in my work. Like every collection, there's at least something that makes someone think, I would have never thought Bonnie would do that. But I weave it in subtly. And you're right. I think that my like staying true to a signature, somewhat predictability in my design work, it has been important to building kind of the brand. But that doesn't mean that I don't work it out like for other projects. If I really want to do something kind of dark or different, I'll still do it. I just probably won't end up in a fabric collection.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So do you have that going on the side? What kind of things are you doing in tandem to this work?
I do some of my own products, and I don't license them. I just get them, manufactured on my own. And I think that's fun. I wouldn't call them dark by any means, but I think it's fun because, I get to call all of the shots and I get to go dark. I just did a set of planners, right? And I went really dark with the cover. And, it's kind of up to me. And that part of it is fun. It just ensures that I have the freedom to develop something from start to finish. And that's really, just fun, I would say.
Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah, you're not confined, obviously, to just these two collections. It comes out in all these other ways, I think it's my narrow view of the mediocre kind of fabrics that we see out there. Of course, I think taking this personal vision to this industry is, it's like, it's the top 10%, right? Like if in fine art, it's like, that's what I'm coaching everyone towards. Like if you can get in that top 5 or 10%, which is not that hard, you just have to kind of pay attention to your own truth, then you get a lot of freedom. Then you get people coming for what you're making.
It's that easy. It is. It's hard to really live that out, but it is. I kind of agree with you. It's that top 10%. And if you're willing to really be consistent and just continually seek and chase after that pureness, I think, I see people achieve it over and over again.
I talk about sort of improvement and creating value in what you're making by having this like really amazing sensitivity. And this is what you did that whole year. You just got more sensitive. But can you speak to like how people can develop this? Is there any tricks or kind of ways that you approach what you're making that someone listening might sort of find an inroad to doing this for themselves and just becoming more awake? I'm always trying to come up with ways to help people with this.
Well, I'd say two things. And the first one I already mentioned, and that is the consistency. I think people really want to arrive more quickly than is possible. And it will, they just lose steam. And oftentimes they lose steam right before they kind of hit the breakthrough. And so, I think something about me and you, Nick, is we just keep showing up. And if you just keep showing up, it's imperfect and it's good days and bad days, but there's really only one natural result, and that's growth in your personal life and in your personal work, and also kind of in your online endeavors. It just grows as long as you kind of consistently just keep showing up. And then the second one for us in our industry, we typically do kind of work off of themes, for the most part. Illustrative work is typically worked off of a theme. And I think the biggest kind of pitfall or the saddest thing that I see is that people really stay behind their computer to really gather their inspiration. And I think that it's one of the things that makes this career so incredibly fulfilling is that it's what gets you out from behind, technology. And so I talk about how to chase after your inspiration and really truly get in front of what inspires you. And that requires, getting your sketchbook and your camera and getting out into the real world and getting in front of and really studying what it is you want to then develop in your art. And so that doesn't happen by accident. You have to really intentionally remove yourself from looking at other people's work and how they've developed their style, and then just go kind of seek the thing that you really want to study and develop in your own work, and then just do the work.
Yeah. Which, if you're paying attention and you're sourcing what inspires you, it's like a hall pass to life. I mean, it's the best because you're not, absolutely. I mean, that's, you're saying it's like, well, you got to put the work in, but it's not it's not that thing of like, well, 10,000 hours and eventually, I mean, it's sort of that, but it's also like when you're into it, because it inspires you, it's like
Hmm.
you'd rather be doing this anyway, So I think
Oh,
for
yeah.
me, and what I'm seeing is like getting people so those hours are like the best. That's really, really helpful.
It's one of my favorite things to see click for people because I think it feels kind of daunting. Like, well, I don't know how to source that inspiration. And, I break it down. I'm like, literally, you can either go for a walk or you can go for a walk and be on the hunt for inspiration. And as you kind of train your eyes to just start picking up on things, you don't have to go far. It's right there in front of you. And you just see things with this new perspective of possibility. Like everything becomes possible to incorporate into your work. And, to me, it's like what makes me live. Now I get to look at things differently when I travel, and I get to go seek out going to, botanical gardens or museums or ranches or whatever it is that I want to get in front of. And it makes me live more.
You're saying this, and I describe it as, you're walking down the street and all the things that you're seeing, some of them, and this does take a level of discernment and awareness, but if you start paying attention, certain things kind of just have a little bit more juice for you. The things that make you feel a little bit more alive are the ones you want to pay attention to. And do you think, I mean, I do, but do you feel like this ability to curate, this discernment is teachable, or it improves with time, right? It's like a muscle.
I do think it's like a muscle, and I do think it's teachable, but it is tricky. I think for our probably both of our work, what you really need is like taste, like a sense of composition. And if you have that, everything else you can develop. I think that's probably the hardest thing to teach because it's so kind of gut related. It's so intuitive, and either composition comes naturally to you or you really have to work at it. But I think, if it doesn't come natural to you, you can absolutely work to develop it. It is just like a muscle.
That's the difference, right, between a successful person and and someone just kind of getting a lot of rejections. It has to do with that curation, what they're saying yes to and what they're saying no to, and then that ends up being like an amazing pattern or one that's just kind of typical. I mean,
Yeah.
I see how a lot of what you're talking about and just this ability to craft a process and to do this journey over time, it also relates to business. And I know you went to business school, but like, it's amazing, isn't it, how similar growing your art is to growing businesses. And I know I just want to touch upon the fact that you've grown in a community around yourself of people you're helping people do surface design. And could you just touch upon like how your art making has helped you in business? Because this is a myth that artists aren't good business people. And I don't think so, but you seem a prime example of successful artist as well as an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah. I think creative entrepreneurship is just the most fulfilling kind of career option, because when you take creativity and then you also put behind it the wisdom of entrepreneurship, it really just, there's no limit to the possibility. I think both are equally learnable. I really spent some time lamenting over the fact that I went to business school when I wished that I had gone to art school. And I'll never forget, I walked into an art gallery and I was kind of sharing this with the owner, and he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, but you know what? You can be the best artist in the world, but if you don't know how to market your work, you won't be successful." And honestly, I think, close to the opposite is true too. You can maybe not be the best artist in the world, but if you do know how to market your work and you learn that business side of it too, then you can also be successful. And so, we really set out to normalize the success of creatives. There is no need for that kind of fearful, starving artist mindset anymore. And so I teach this kind of abundance-based mindset. Are we open to success? Are we open to letting the creativity flow through us? And then also learning what it takes to build a brand and build a business that goes on to serve us and, our family and the people around us. And so it's been just a huge joy and honor for me to be able to watch so many people come through and really be able to drastically change their lives and careers with both of those, skill sets brought together.
Yeah, it gives me confidence in my own practice. And I don't know, sometimes I don't think students believe this, but it really inspires me when I see people that began something they were not so sure about. And by watching them get it and seeing what's possible, it just gives me confidence that there's more for me coming up. It's like, it's just this opening, this evolution of yourself with this art, whatever it looks like next to you, that's developing and changing and becoming more like you all the time. So, wow.
Yeah. I love that.
So what's the name of your community? And you guys will have links to all the places you can find more of Bonnie and all she's creating. But I mean, you're basically helping people create this life, right? This surface pattern, but the whole approach, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I have a course and a membership. The course is called Surface Design Immersion, and we're in it right now. It's an 8-week-long course that I teach once a year. And so that really takes everyone from really start to finish. So you learn Adobe Illustrator and move into pattern making and portfolio building. And then we wrap up with creative entrepreneurship. I also have a membership called Flourish that is really based on inspiration for surface designers and kind of continued education and resources with the industry and, collection creation and all of that kind of stuff too. So they really complement each other. Yeah.
Okay. I want to do this now.
Oh, Nick, you
I don't have time, but I want to do a pattern. I want to do okay. I'll just wait.
I want to do a huge piece of fine art. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then we can make this happen. Listen, Bonnie, thanks so much for just sharing your world with us today. It's super inspiring. And there'll be links at arttolife.com under podcast, all her courses, as well as examples of Bonnie's art. Bonnie, thank you so much.
Nicholas, thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Art to Life show. If you enjoyed the podcast, please help me get the word out by sharing it with your friends on Instagram at arttolife_world. The recording of this and all episodes, along with a place to leave comments, see additional photos, and discover a whole new approach to making art, can be found by going to arttolifepodcast.com. And secondly, if you could leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on today, I would super appreciate it. It makes a big difference. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my artist list, every Sunday morning I send out a video blog all about art making. Go to arttolifepodcast.com to sign up. And all these links are in the show notes, of course. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.